They work under the most difficult circumstances, oftentimes having to put their own lives in danger to get to those that need healthcare the most. Today, we talk about healthcare workers and whether or not there are protections sufficient enough to protect them in the doings of their job. Workers' World starts now.
From England to Poland, every step across the ocean, the ruling classes them is in a mess. Oh yes, the capitalist system and regrets, but the Soviet
Our
system.
Workers' World Show. I'm your host, Sharik Trumodi. Thank you once again for having joined us as we continue our series and our coverage on those within the medical fraternity. This time around, focusing on emergency healthcare workers in South Africa that include ambulance assistants, care technicians, and emergency care practitioners. Many of them go to work often facing the risk of getting robbed by criminal elements, communities that they are serving. A report by the South African Medical Association had found that violence against paramedics is common and that it is the most common act of violence against them in the robbery of their personal and professional belongings. Does the Occupational Health and Safety Act, as well as the Compensation Act, or COIDA, support and protect emergency healthcare personnel and assist them with their losses or injuries sustained while on duty? On today's show, we gained some insight on the relevant health and safety legislation that supports emergency healthcare workers. But first, of course, let's get into this conversation now as we welcome Maxwell Motibi from the National Education, Health and Allied Workers Union in Nehawu, where he serves, of course, as the national organizer. We also have Sibonile Jiza with us again, the national organizer for NUPSAO, the National Union of Public Services and Allied Workers Union. Thank you very much to the both of you for having joined us. I want to start off with Nehawu to understand the general environment under which emergency medical services work at the moment. How would you describe that?
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. As you have said, my name is Maxwell Mutini from Nehawu, and I thank you and your broadcasting show for inviting us to this interview. With regards to the emergency workers in South Africa, we do have a few challenges, as you have mentioned, regarding occupational health and safety. But maybe just to be direct to your question, yes, the Act does cover emergency care workers. They have the full rights that are envisaged in the Act. However, we do know that the work that they are doing is under a high level of risk in that they have a responsibility to go and pick up patients in communities where there's a high level of danger, and sometimes the call outs happen in situations where there's a crime scene. For instance, sometimes there would be people fighting, and then there'd be stabbing wounds that would occur where these emergency workers will be expected to go and pick up these particular patients. In cases where they do get injured on duty, we know that the Act does cover them for them to have access to COIDA, cover their medical bills, ensure that they do get some medical assistance, and where there's a need for compensation, and there is satisfaction that they do qualify for such. And we do assist them as the union to ensure that they gain access to those particular compensations.
Yeah.
I thank you.
Okay. And how much would you say, Sibonile, the employer is attentive to the conditions under which emergency medical services have to work?
No, thanks once more again for inviting us in this, interviews, your broadcast show. Look, basically, to be honest and friendly, this is a critical skill job. And we know also the challenges. There is a shortage of these skills. We know as we speak, approximately through the public health professional councils, they have registered maybe, we'll say, in the region of 52,000. And the vision, the envisaged goal is to have maybe 90,000. And therefore, it's clear that the demand are not being met, you know. And when they are not being met, obviously, they will work under strenuous conditions. As you know, that is a high-pressure working environment. And to that extent, you find that they work overtime, you know. And you remember this accident, you know, as something that one does not plan for it, you know. They happen and so on and so on. And it becomes also very difficult, you know, for them to actually work, you know, under such conditions, you know. The laws are there. They are very good, you know, as my colleague has explained, they do cover them if there's a specific case and so on. But we are saying the government must go extra mile, you know, in terms of making sure that, you know, even after work, you know, I'm talking about the rehab centers and so on, you know, because, you know, the work that they are doing is very dire, you know, and for us, you know, we even refer to them, you know, as they're doing the work for their callings, you know, it's not to say, because they are lifesaver, by the way, you know, but their challenges are there as we go, as my colleagues have said, you know, the law is there, but really the only problem that you are facing, they are not meeting the target, you know, as you know, in terms of we are faced with austerity measures. The government is talking of, you know, attrition policies to make sure that if there is a funded vacant post, maybe I leave for green pastures. They don't replace. What they do, they recruit in the EPWPs as a form of, I would say, it's a cheap labor. Do you understand? With no skills and so on. But the question is, where are we going with this? You know, those are some of the challenges that we are actually grappling with, even in response to the social detriment of the health. It's difficult. You look at the substandard health facilities, buildings that are working under it, you know, maintenance, it's a problem. The road, you know, even going rural areas, we talk of Eastern Cape, we
Sure.
talk of, you know, Northern Cape. It's a problem.
In fact, I want to just, sorry to interject, I want to pick up on that very quickly, the fact that in some townships and informal dwellings, we have the Department of Health reporting that many emergency vehicles do not have the safety, you know, standards to be able to move into some of these informal areas. And of course, in some cases, they do get attacked when so doing. So maybe, Maxwell, is there an established protocol within which they work when having to go to these dangerous circumstances?
No, no, and that is one example, you know, that shows the danger of the work that these employees have to do. In most cases, you'll find informal settlements, as you are referring to, where the roads are not, you know, drivable for these people to access the patient. And sometimes they have to even rely on a GPS maybe to access the address. And some of these locations cannot be picked up on the GPS or on the navigator. So these are the challenges that these workers are faced with. There is no protocol that has been set out to say, if you cannot access these particular patients, this is what you need to do. Therefore, our members are then forced to go an extra mile themselves and sometimes drop a vehicle somewhere to see whether they can gain access by foot to where the patient is. And that exposes them to even a higher level of a risk or danger, because when you work into these informal settlements, sometimes you are exposed to a situation where you might get robbed, or, you know, you find yourself in a situation that you cannot control. So they do, as members, go an extra mile to try and access but in some stages it's not doable, and then they'll be forced to return back without the patient. And as you know, that access to emergency medical care is a constitutional right. Therefore, the community would then litigate against the department for
All right, we'll come back certainly to you. Maxwell, very quickly, in a couple of seconds, the way in which, or rather Sibonile, in a couple of seconds, the way in which there's a current paradigm in which police would assist and go into these communities with the emergency medical services. Has that worked? In just a quick couple of seconds. Sibonile?
Yes, no. Basically, those recommendations were made, and unfortunately, due to, as I explained, shortage of skill, there is also scarcity on the issue of the South African police services. Even for them, if you ask for reinforcement, it becomes a challenge. You find that maybe the van is gone to attend to a crime scene somewhere. It becomes really a challenge.
Yeah, and then in the process, somebody ends up getting really ill and possibly even dying. Once we return from the break, what happens when an emergency worker is injured on the job? What benefits or recourse is there for them? We'll answer that after the break. To stay with us. We've been able to establish that emergency healthcare work is considered to be a high-risk category. What are the ways in which we are trying to mitigate against this? Of course, crime is a scourge visited upon us all of society, and clearly what we now see, is the impact of that when community healthcare workers, as we've established in a previous show, including emergency medical services, are often and regularly attacked when trying to do their job. Maxwell, what happens when an EMS worker does get attacked and get injured on the job, be it in the circumstance of responding or even any other circumstance? Are they, receiving any due care and benefit with occupational health and safety, including COIDA?
Yeah, in the first instance, it is unfortunate. It's not supposed to happen that emergency care workers get attacked by communities, because their entry at the community level is to assist in terms of emergency healthcare work. Yes, we do have incidents that have been reported whereby our members have been attacked by communities whilst they are on duty. We know that there are instances where we had to fight as the union to ensure that the employer assists these particular workers in terms of what the Act says, especially COIDA. So we even went as further as suggesting that in some scenes they need to be accompanied by the police to ensure their safety. We've seen that because of shortages of staff, as my comrade has said earlier on, austerity measures have led to even shortages of police and also shortages of emergency workers. Therefore, you'll find situations where these workers, they by themselves, maybe two of them having to attend to a scene which is a crime scene without the being accompanied by police. So in that situation, what would then happen is that the employer has the duty to ensure that they receive immediate health care, and then thereafter we can follow the processes of making sure that they get compensation in terms of COIDA for having been met an accident or for having being attacked whilst they are on duty. So we know that there are such measures in place to ensure that they gain access to that. But our main concern is the issue of ensuring that there is prevention of such from happening. That is the main issue that we need to really attend to. And we believe that by making sure that there is sufficient staff in terms of police, in terms of emergency care, we can mitigate the risk to make sure that we avoid situations where these emergency care workers are exposed to high danger. Thank you.
Okay, Sibonile, are there scenarios that you are aware of in which EMS workers, emergency medical staff, would be able to lay claim for compensation or benefit in the event that they were either injured or they contracted disease while expensing with their duties? Do you know of any cases that you can relay and experience to us?
No, look, to be honestly, upfront, there has never been a specific case where we have on maybe, lodge this document, follow all due processes in terms of, seeking compensation in terms of COIDA and so forth and so forth. There has never been such that has been brought to our attention, basically. But we always conscientize and encourage our members to make sure that whatever they must do it within the ambit of the law. They must not, twist their, muscles and arm where they are not required. We are always guiding them and so forth, but there's never been such case brought to our attention, by the way.
Yeah, and in some areas, I understand, or provinces like Gauteng and the Eastern Cape, they've reported a shortage in vehicles and equipment to be able to do their jobs. Maxwell, how serious of a situation are we looking at?
Well, the situation is dire. We do have a high shortage of emergency vehicle in the two provinces, as you have mentioned, but the problem is common in the country, whereby it is even happening in other provinces. To a point that some of the emergency care workers would sit at the station without a vehicle to attend to emergency situations. Some of the vehicles are parked in the yard because of they are not being properly maintained by the state, and then some of them are not even roadworthy. So the shortages, it's very high, and really as a result, that is another thing that causes a high risk for our members, because some community members, when they react against the emergency care workers, it would be because they had been waiting for too long for an ambulance to arrive at the scene. And that is not to be blamed on our members, but it is to be blamed on the shortage of vehicles. Because one would be attending to a scene and then only, when just after dropping a body at the hospital, you have to rush to another scene. And sometimes these ambulances are also expected to escort patients from one province from one district to another, because of not all the district hospitals are able to give care that is required by the patient. So it is a serious problem that we think that it needs to be attended to, as a matter of emergency, especially going to the festive season. Because with the number of vehicles that we have on the ground, we will not be able to meet the demands that comes with the festive season. Thank you very much.
All right, and I think that's an important point because, as you say from some of your members, I'd like to also understand what the extent of unionization would be of some emergency healthcare workers and the protection certainly accorded to them. Once we return from the break, I want to get to understand what efforts are underway to ensure a better and a safer working environment for some of these emergency medical staff. That and more certainly once we to return from the break. Do stay with us. All right, we are talking about emergency medical staff and the way in which they remain at risk oftentimes with the expensing of their duties of the job. And as we have established that when responding to an emergency, oftentimes they do find themselves in harm's way. And the assistance that's being provided with the police assisting them have oftentimes been a source of frustration because of how long it takes to locate a van to assist them to go and do their job. I want to, Maxwell, just pick up with you very quickly in terms of the workers that have gone into some of these areas, and Sibonile earlier indicating that there hasn't been, in some, at least according to his knowledge, cases of occupational health and safety or even COIDA applications being pursued. But we do know that some workers are getting attacked from time to time, and does that mean that it's just simply not being reported?
No, it does get reported. We have reports from provinces like Gauteng, Eastern Cape. There have been here and there incidents in KZN. We do receive reports where members are being attacked when attending to cases, and they are being attacked by community members. This happens mostly in cases where there's like for instance, where there's a protest action, sometimes the blockade would not even allow an ambulance to go through. In cases where there is some form of violence in taverns, in a household where the family is fighting, members end up being part of these altercations, and they end up in harm's way, as you have indicated. So we do have incidents that have been reported at the level of the council, which is the Public Health Social Development Council. We've had an item on the agenda where we discussed the risk that these workers are being exposed in. So yes, there is a high level of danger that we are aware of, but we as a union ensure by all means that number one, once a member becomes is found or meets an accident or is injured in the workplace, with due processes are followed to the latter to ensure that they get what is due to them in the form of compensation, and also they receive the necessary care, and the employer bears the cost to make sure. But ours, as I have indicated earlier on, is to make sure that we prevent these things from happening. You are right to say that going with the police sometimes is not practical because of the shortages of the police that we have in the country. And sometimes the police themselves, when they go to the scene, they attend to their duties, and escorting in EMS for them sometimes becomes secondary. And therefore, we will have to find ways to make sure that we standardize the protection of emergency care workers in as far as attending to the scenes is concerned.
Yeah. Okay, I just want to stay with you very quickly because I want to get an update on one of our previous matters that we highlighted and we're dealing with, and that was in relation to community healthcare workers and their absorption into more formal employment by the Department of Health. Unions like NEHAWU had gone to undertake legal challenges in this regard. What is the basis of that, and what is the update there?
Yeah, look, it has been established that CHWs are employees of the department. Currently, they are receiving their stipend from the department. In our view, the department has failed to show any justifiable reason why they have kept these CHWs in a fixed-term contract for so long. So we referred the matter for dispute at the level of the council. It went to arbitration. We were not happy with the outcome of the arbitration because the commissioner failed to take care of the Section 198 provisions, which says that the employer, for them to keep an employee on a contract for the period exceeding 3 months, must have justifiable reasons, and they are listed from A to H. And in our view, all the justifiable reasons that have been listed on the Act, the employer, we believe, has not been able to take care of any one of them. As a result, we then took that particular arbitration award for a review at the Labour Court. The court was held on the 29th of October. And if you were in court, you would have heard that our argument is very strong. The employer failed to defend their case. Our lawyers were all over them in terms of demonstrating that indeed these CHWs must be appointed permanently. Unfortunately, the judge reserved his judgment. We are waiting for it. Normally, it would take around 60 to 90 days. We are hoping that in the early or in the later days of January 2025, we will receive that judgment. If not, we'll definitely put pressure on the Labour Court to issue that judgment, because our members are waiting with bated breath on the outcome of that particular case. We are confident that indeed this department ought to have appointed these CHWs permanently. We know of an arbitration award of Mbochela versus the Department of Health, which ruled in favor of the CHWs. we have followed the same language of Section 198 to say that the employer has shown no justifiable reason why they have kept these CHWs
Sure.
on a contract for such a long time. And
Okay.
indeed, we shall continue to fight for this permanent absorption as NEHAO. Thank
Okay,
you very
and
much.
of course we will check in January to see what the outcome of this will most definitely be, and I suppose it could even go much higher than the Labour Court, but we'll revisit this at a later time. I want to maybe begin, Sibonile, to wrap up and ask, how do you envisage a better, safer working environment for emergency medical staff?
Yeah, look, basically it's simple. The question is the resources. Government is always crying that I don't have money to fund these projects and to fund this department. So it tells us maybe let's go to the drawing board. Maybe let's change, let's bring about a reform. Maybe I would say policy reform in a form of government, of workers, by the workers, and for the workers. Because we know the resources that are always crying foul of, it's there, you know. So I don't know why, because we know in South Africa we have a right to life. And these emergency care personnel, they are there to save our lives, you know. So all in all, what we are requesting is that, you know, let's go back to the drawing board. Maybe let's have the government, because this government is not yielding the call. By the way, they're not even increasing, you know, the number of these professional EMS, you know, personnel, you know, to work, you know. We don't know, even if they're there, they are not even employing them, you know. So it's a challenge. That is our submission. It's simple. Reform, maybe referendum, get a government that will listen to the workers. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much, Sibonile, for having joined us as we continue our discussion on emergency medical staff and what sort of protections we can ensure that they have a better working environment. Until we talk once again, thank you very much for having tuned in. This has been Workers' World. Have a lovely day. Bye-bye.